The wargaming industry is pretty crowded these days. There are a plethora of great games in a multitude of different genres. Now, some games make it into the mainstream and establish themselves as classics, games like Warhammer, Conquest, even War Machine. But other games fall into the shadows and are forgotten. They never quite take off. In today's video, we're going to discuss why I think some games succeed and others don't. Then we're going to take a look at two games that I really enjoy, but they never quite made it into the mainstream. So let's go ahead and dive right in. There are so many different things that can go into determining whether a game is successful or whether it fails, and it's kind of hard to limit that down to just a few things, but I think I've come up with three core things that I think impact the success of a game. The first thing that a game needs to succeed is a solid game design. Now, this includes both the lore of the game as well as the mechanics. If you don't have both of these elements, I feel like it's very difficult to make people play your game. At the very least, you have to have a cool setting. You can get away with having the mechanics of your game be subpar if the setting is really engaging. We see some mainstream games get away with this all the time. Whether your game is balanced or not is less important than whether it is fun. It's always unfortunate when you run into a game that has really cool mechanics but zero story, or vice versa, when you run into a game with really cool story but zero game design experience, and so the game is clunky and doesn't play very well. And I think a lot of games, especially in our modern age with how many games are being developed, a lot of games fall into this trap where they sacrifice on one of these two fronts, and the game as a whole suffers because of it. Now, the second thing, and perhaps the most important thing when developing a game, is good business skills. This kills so many games because anybody can have a cool idea, but not everybody knows how to develop that idea into an actual product and distribute it to people. A lot of people underestimate just how much goes into developing a game. You have to be able to write the rule books. You've got to be able to publish those rule books. You have to be able to produce miniatures and make deals to arrange for the materials for your miniatures. You have to be able to market and distribute your models to retailers so that people can actually get a hold of your game. If you cut out any of these elements, it can result in the whole thing falling apart, because if nobody can buy your game, nobody's going to play it. And if nobody's playing it and nobody's buying it, you're not going to make any money, and you're not going to be able to sustain the development of that game for very long. The third thing that impacts the success of a game is community involvement. Now, this is a really important one, and a lot of games fall short, especially in today's market, where platforms like Kickstarter really only encourage you to market the game really well up until you funded it. And so we see a lot of games that launch through Kickstarter and then they can't get a good community once the players actually have the game. Now, games like Warhammer don't have to worry about this as much because they already have decades of players that have built the community for them. But if you're launching a new game, you really need to have a plan for how you're going to capture the community. Conquest is one of the best examples of a game that captures the community and keeps the community involved, whether it's through their Discord, where they're giving constant direct feedback with their community, or through things like allowing players to vote for the next army. The community always feels involved, and that's something that a lot of games are lacking, and honestly something that we can actually help with as players. We can build communities in our local areas where we play our games. Now, let me know what you guys think about this. Do you think I'm right? Do you think these things matter in developing a game? Are there things that you think are more important that maybe you've seen in your personal experience? Let me know in the comments below this video. Now, at this point, we're going to start talking about a couple games that I really enjoy, but they've never really made it into the mainstream. They're good games, but they're lacking in one of these areas, or maybe there's circumstances that have just flat out prevented the game from succeeding. The first of the games we're going to discuss tonight is Halo Ground Command. Now, I love Halo. That is my favorite sci-fi universe ever. So when I found out there was a miniatures game set in the Halo universe, I was very excited. The game was released in 2016 by a company called Spartan Games. Unfortunately, this game ended up getting canceled only a couple years after launch due to the company itself having some internal issues, including, I believe, the death of one of their developers. So the game was shut down. But the community that was built built around this game has continued to develop rules and release 3D print files for the miniatures for this game, so you can still play it today. In fact, they hold about twice a year a big gathering of the fans for this game, once at Adepticon and then once hosted by one of the main community members across the country. It's very cool that this community has been able to establish itself this way, and it just goes to show that if you have good community involvement with your game, it's going to take off. Now, this game is definitely smaller, but you can get into it for really cheap. It only costs maybe $50 to print an army if you have your own printer, and if you don't, well, you can expect to spend a little more than that because you're paying somebody else to print it. If you'd like to get involved with Halo Ground Command, you can find links in the description that'll take you to the Facebook group associated with this game, and from there it's pretty easy to find the rules and the STLs to get involved with the game. The second game we're going to discuss tonight is Verge of War. This is a really fun science fiction game that's developed by a company in Ukraine called Integrity First Games. Now, right off the bat, the fact that this game is developed in Ukraine can kind of tell you why it's struggling to become mainstream right now. And on top of that, their second Kickstarter for this game launched in 2020, which was perhaps one of the worst times to be trying to do a Kickstarter campaign. Now, the game itself is a lot of fun. The miniatures are really cool. The theme is really cool. Humanity is just barely expanding beyond the solar system and is discovering that there are plenty of enemy races out there that want to engage in battle with them. I've enjoyed every game that I've played in this game. I even helped with playtesting. Now, there is a bit of a language barrier with the rules. Because English is not the native language of the developers, sometimes there are grammatical errors and you have to email them and ask for clarifications on rules. I can overlook that because the game itself is pretty fun. Right now, the game is moving slowly though, and this is one that I fear could be on the verge of dying. Now, I hate to use the term dead games because I believe that a game is not dead as long as there's at least one or two people out there that are playing it, and right now there are. On my end, I'm pushing for a sort of resurgence of the game because I would hate to see it fail because of things that are outside of the control of the developers. Now, I've heard from the developers that they are planning the next two factions in the game, as well as fleshing out the models for the rest of the stuff they've already designed in the game. Now, obviously, it's going to be a slow timeline on the release for those, but I am looking forward to the future of this game. I do think it is one of my favorite sci-fi games that I've tried out in the last few years. If you made it this far into the video, I just have to say thank you. This was a very experimental video, and I honestly wasn't sure if anybody would actually want to listen to me ramble on about my thoughts on wargaming. If you did like this video, let me know in the comments so that I can plan to make more videos like this in the future. I certainly enjoy making videos of this type. They go together faster than paint tutorials, and at least over the next few months, I expect to be very busy painting terrain in preparation for some tournaments that I'm going to host in the fall. So this would certainly make my life a little bit easier if I could throw these in place of paint tutorials every now and then. I'd like to also give a special shout out to my channel members. They make videos like this possible. If you would like to become a channel member, hit the join button below this video. As always, have an amazing day, and we'll catch you in the next one.